When you move into the workplace, you'll be expected to do a lot more than just code. First of all, you'll probably be added to an agile team, in which you'll learn all sorts of new words, phrases, and behaviors to become part of a productive team. But another component is learning the local method for combining files through GitHub or GitLab. Each company does it slightly differently. To that end, you will occasionally be asked to do group projects as part of our web dev learning. It can be perceived as wearisome, and that you could do the project more easily on your own. This is probably true for our exercises, but learning how to collaborate, both interpersonally and with GitHub, is a necessary job skill. One of your groups should be designated as the project lead, the one who will set up the Git repository and take care of approving the pull requests. The other team members will have to clone that repository, branch it for their work, check in their work, and create pull requests. In this project, the team leader will also be the team member, so that person will have to learn all the same processes. Let's start with the team lead, who goes by the handle of Socrates. He will take his local project directory and create a repository within it. First, Git has to be initialized within that directory, then the directory has to be added to Git, and finally, whatever files are there have to be committed in preparation for uploading to the remote repository. Now the admin should log into GitHub and create a new repository, giving it a name that makes sense and appropriate description. Make sure to make the repository public so that the other team members can easily access it. And then click the Create Repository button. The next screen that pops up has all sorts of great information about how you might do the process in reverse, meaning make the repository first and then link it down to your local directory. But in this case, all we're interested in is the Quick Setup link. Click the Copy button way out to the right end of the Quick Setup URL to copy it to your clipboard. We'll use it again in a minute. Now head back to your command prompt and type git remote add origin and then paste the URL you just copied. This will create a link inside your local repository that will always know where to look to when interacting with the remote repository. The final thing in this step is to push the files you committed in the previous step up to the remote master by typing git push origin master. This will copy your files to the remote master. You could use a different word to identify that this is the original push, but origin is pretty standard. Just to make sure everything worked, you could go over to GitHub, reload, and make sure your files are all there. Looking good. So what we have done so far is that Socrates, the administrator, has added a Git repository to his local files, created a remote repository in GitHub, and has now established a link between them and uploaded the initial files. But what of the other team members? Don't they get to do something? Well, before they can, you have to provide them the same URL you used to link your local and remote repositories. Use your favorite method to send them the URL, and then they can get going. Our team member, Nikki, now has to do a few things on her computer to get it ready for receiving Socrates' files. At the directory within which Nikki wants the directory to arrive, she should follow these steps to prepare the directory. Then, taking the URL she got from Socrates, she'll run the git remote add origin plus the URL command. This will establish the upstream link to the remote master. Then she should use the same URL with the git clone command. This will bring a copy of the files on the remote repository down to her local repository. To make sure everything arrived correctly, she can change to the new directory and get a directory listing. Sure enough, this looks good too. Let's now see what we have so far. Socrates still has his local repository hooked up to the remote repository, but now Nikki too has made a local repository into which she has cloned whatever Socrates put in the remote master. Is it time to get to work yet? Well, not quite, because you don't ever want to do any work on the master. Instead, you want to create a branch from the master where you'll actually do the work. By the way, in the real world, this would be even more complicated because there you would first have a branch created for the feature the team was working on during the current Agile sprint, and then each team member would create a further branch away from the feature branch for their own portion of the work. But in this project, a single branch will be sufficient. To do this, Nikki would issue the git branch command in her terminal, calling the name of the branch something that has meaning for the part of the project she is working on. Since she has been assigned the task of setting up the server, she'll call hers server setup. This creates a new version of the repository. And now, for her to make sure she's working on those files, she'll type the git checkout command with the name of the branch. Now, any work that is done will be safely performed in the branch, leaving the master intact. Since Socrates is also a team member and has been assigned the routing section of the work, he too will create a local branch and check it out, naming it routes. With all these Git functions out of the way, it is now time to get to work and code what you have been assigned to do, each team member working safely within their own branch. But when each of you is done, it is time to collaborate with the rest of the team. The first step is to lodge a copy of your work safely on the remote repository. In a minute, you're going to be merging other people's work into yours, so you want a nice clean copy to go back to if someone else's code messes yours up. To do this, go back to your command prompt, add all the files to Git, and then create a new commit. You can call it anything you want, but initial commit for your first try is also pretty standard. Then push the committed files to your origin and give the branch there a name that matches your local branch. Now Socrates' changes are safely on the remote repository. Nikki, whenever she gets done, should do the exact same thing. And now it is Socrates' turn to log back into GitHub and take care of all the pull requests. Think of pull as meaning to move the files from the new branches into the remote master. In real life, this would be preceded by a code review and/or a demonstration of what your code does to the team. But for now, Socrates is just going to check in his own branch so that Nikki can in turn pull it down to her local branch. After logging in, Socrates will click the appropriate links and buttons to get him into the area where he can see all of the branches that have been pushed to the remote repository. Since he's going to be pulling his own routes branch, he'll click on that and click the Create Pull Request button. Here he might take the time to note the changes he made before clicking the Create Pull Request button. Then, Git will check for any conflicts that might exist between files already pulled, but of course in this case there are no merge problems, so Socrates can click the button to merge the pull request and then confirm the change. But now how does Nikki get those files onto her local branch? Well, first she wants to leave the local branch and go back to the local master, which she does by using the git checkout command, specifying that she wants to go back to the master. When she's there, she'll issue the command to pull down all changes from the remote server. Then, with the master all up to date, she can head back to her local branch by typing git checkout and the branch name. To merge the files, type git merge --no--ff master. This --no--ff is a common switch used to invoke the fast forward feature, which simply takes care of a bit of housekeeping you don't need to worry about at the moment. But this is where things can often get a little dicey. When you and your Scrum team are working on different parts of the feature, someone is going to have made some changes to the same file you did, inserting a function that you do not have yet. In cases like these, you'll have to go through a merge process, where you use a tool like VS Code to, quote, diff the pages, or see the difference in the pages side by side, and then choose whether to accept those other changes or not. This is beyond the current scope of this project, however, as each of you are working on your own subset of files. If your merge shows that no conflicts exist, you can clear the terminal by typing 2 capital Z's and pressing Enter. Otherwise, you're just going to have to go through the merge process. But now that Nikki has merged Socrates' changes into her local branch, she can do her work. And when she's done, create another commit and push the new version, in this case update 1, to her remote branch. And once it is there, Socrates can take the responsibility of merging it into the remote master with a new pull request. This is our version of the GitHub process that you should use when collaborating with students on group projects here. Feel free to come back to this video whenever you're ready to move on to the next step in the Git process to refresh your mind on what commands you should be issuing and where to do them.